Hi, it's Julie at the Mother Ranch. This is a supply video for all of the free online classes that I'm going to be offering, particularly through the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my workspace camera so you can see all the things I'm talking about. So first of all, we're going to go over my work surface, which is no big deal, just a table. And then this piece here is just a piece of poster board. You could use anything, cardboard or whatever you had around. It's just nice to have something that's a little bit absorbent to pick up any of the splatters and bits of paint that you might encounter. The watercolor paper, I use 300-pound watercolor paper. You can use 140. It will buckle, but I will show you how to deal with that. So the 300-pound comes, as does the 140-pound. You can see right here. It says 640 here, but the number you're looking for, because, well, if you're in the United States, the number you're looking for is this pound number here, the 300-pound. I like this kind of paper because I like the thickness of this paper because it doesn't buckle. It might bend a little bit, but it doesn't buckle. So this is a watercolor pad, and I like these a lot. You can't actually tell. Let me get another one out because this is different looking. This one's brand new. So this is what it looks like, and it's glued on all four sides, and then there's just this little spot right here, and the way you get it loose is to take a palette knife and stick it in there and then just loosen it up like this on all the way around. So what's nice about this is there's no need to tape it, and it does not go through. It's so heavy it doesn't go through either. So that is a nice option. They also make watercolor paper that comes in what looks to be big pads like I was just showing you, but is just individual sheets. That would work too. As you can see, it's very, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it's very, very thick, the 300-pound. Okay, so that's an option. You can get it in big sheets, like 22 by 30, and cut it. And if you do decide to do that, then I have another video that will show you exactly how to do that. So once you get your paper and you figure out what kind of paper you're going to use, if you're using a thinner paper or a 300-pound, you need to tape it down to something. I don't tape it to my work surface because I might want to turn it to do different things. So I use painter's tape to do that, and I just tape it on all four sides, all the way around. You can also use washi tape for that. Something that's going to be easily removable is what you want, because you don't want to pull off the surface of your beautiful watercolor painting. The nice thing about using tape like that is it gives you a really nice clean white border at the end, and that's very pretty. It's a little bit like a kind of like a mat. It looks a little bit like a mat. So then the next thing is I'm going to be giving you, it won't be this big, but I'm going to be giving you a tracing of my artwork. So I create the artwork, then I go back and I create a tracing, and it's going to be printable on a normal sheet of paper. So anything that we do is going to be what is it, 8.5 by 11 is a normal sheet of paper, so you can print it on your home printer. And it'll just be in black, and it's something for you to trace. That way you're not having to learn how to draw too. This isn't a drawing class. This is a fun class. Not that drawing's not fun, but I know it can be very stressful for some people. This is graphite paper. It usually comes in a pack. You can get it in different sizes. This is what you're going to use to trace with. So you're going to use your water, so this will be your back, then your watercolor paper will be taped on top unless you have a block, and then you'll just have the block sitting there, or a pad. And then you'll have your watercolor paper here. Then you're going to take this, and you can see the graphite's on one side and it's white on the other. You turn that upside down. Let's say this is your painting of, say, a goat. You're going to place, or your tracing. Oh my Lord, I can't speak suddenly. Of your, say, a goat, and you're going to use a pencil, something that's a little bit hard. So I wouldn't say, I mean, you could use a ballpoint pen. That would be fine, but it has to be something that you're going to push through, right? And then you're just going to trace all the pieces, and then this can go away. This piece can go away, and what you're going to be left with is the tracing of, say, the goat on the watercolor paper. It's very simple. All right. So you're going to need a pencil for that. You might want to go in afterwards and mess around with it a little bit as far as the way it looks. Maybe you realize, oh, I didn't, there's a little bit of smudge or whatever. So I've got a couple of different things. And of course, some dog hair, because we can't live without that. So you need a regular pencil of whatever kind. I use these white erasers. Don't use pink, because pink leaves the smeary stuff. So you need just a plain white eraser. I think they're called Pentel. And you can also get them in for the end of pencil. And those are nice for the fine areas. Then there's this stuff. It's called poster putty. It's, I don't know, it's called a bunch of different things, but that's what it looks like in the package. You can get it in white. You can get it in yellow. You can get it in blue. You end up, it's kind of stiff when you first start, and as you stretch it out, and it's kind of like silly putty a little bit. So you stretch it out and get it worked a little bit, and then you can take this and lift up pieces of the graphite. It's nice because you can get it into little tiny little pieces, little places. Maybe you need to work on an eye, and the eye has got a little bit too much pencil on it or graphite on it, so you can lift up that pencil with this. Okay, that is all of those pieces. Next, we have watercolors. So before you freak out, oh my God, I've never done watercolors before. I don't know what to do. Okay, first of all, this is one of the ways you can do this. I'm going to show you what I'm using. I'm also going to show you some other stuff. So I have a pan, which is this piece here. It's Winsor Newton. And it is little watercolor cubes. And I just take, this is a shampoo bottle, or one you would use if you were traveling or whatever. And I put a little drop of water in there just to get them going. And that's what I use for watercolor. One of the ways. The other way to use it, or to have it, is to do this. So I use tubes, also tubes of watercolor. I have a whole, do you want to see my little slew of tubes of watercolor? See? So you can take tubes and put a little bit in there and add some water and swivel it around, and it ends up drying in this palette, which is fine. I kind of like it like this. I use these other spaces as places to mix. But I do kind of like having them just sitting here. It's very much like having a pan, except I have a lot more color options. This is like a little travel pan. So you can go either way. Let's see, is there anything I want to talk about with that? I think that's it for that. Okay, now, let's say you don't have any watercolors, or the only watercolors you have, and I actually found some from when my son was young, is Crayola. Awesome. Guess what? It works. So I wasn't sure how it was going to work and if it would be okay, but I think it would be, it's going to do the job. So this is Crayola washable watercolors. I know because of the whole COVID-19 thing, we don't have access to run over to Michael's right now and pick things up. So if you have something like this, this would work. So I pulled out a scrap piece of my watercolor paper and I wet this side, and I just laid down some of the color. So this is when you do that, you've got a wet paper, and then you lay down the wet paint. It's called wet and wet. And then over here, I did dry paper with wet paint. And you know, those are bright. They're going to work. So if you have something like that, some sort of kids pan, you are good to go. So no worries, that will work too. Another option would be craft paint. So this is Ceram Coat, and it's just Delta by Delta. It's just regular craft paint. You'd use it on whatever, on all kinds of things. It's acrylic, and which means it's water-based. So about 1.5 years ago, I started painting again after I had been off for about 6 years. And I had freaked myself out. I'd had some things happen in my life, and I wasn't painting anymore. And so I decided I was just going to play. And I didn't pull out any of my watercolors, nothing like that. I literally started off with craft paint. I treated it like watercolor paint for the most part, but somehow it made me feel safe. So I'm going to pull out I did a whole set of paintings and continue to do them, but now I'm doing them in watercolor. So this is all completely done with craft paint. We can still do that wet and wet background with the little blooms. I'll show you how to do that when we get to the actual artwork. But this was all done in craft paint and then colored pencil. There's some colored pencil in here as well. So you can absolutely use craft paint and get a similar look. The difference is that watercolor is much more translucent. Well, is translucent, and craft paint is not. So that's, but it doesn't mean you can't use it. If you've got it, use it, absolutely. So that is another, whoa, that was close. I don't really want to drop that painting. All right. So that's another option. So that's the craft paint. You can also use any old brand, the good stuff or the cheap stuff like this. This is a Liquitex Basics, and this is acrylic. And again, you can use it like craft paint. So when I'm doing the classes, I'm going to talk about what paint I'm using with the watercolor, and then I will also tell you how to use either the craft paint or the acrylic, so you can have a similar experience. All right, then we've got brushes. So I have got, you're getting a funny view on this top-down view. I've got a huge slew of brushes, but these are the ones I've been using lately. So for painting the details and stuff, I would say for the most part, I like to use these rounds. That's what they're called. You probably can't see it, but it does say round, and this is a number 3. What's nice about these brushes is that you get them wet, and you can see they're thick here and they're thin on the end. Can you see that? Is it better here? That's better there. Which means they pick up a lot of watercolor, or paint in this case, whichever one you're using. And so they enable you to paint for a long time using one dip. And it's got this nice sharp little point for the detail work. So I have a 3, I have a 6, I've got a 4, I've got various sizes. I would say, I don't know, 3, anywhere between 3, 4, 5, even 6 would be great. I also use liners for the fine, fine detail. So this is a 2-0, so it's a 2, you can't see it, I'm sure, but it's a 2/0, and it's a liner. So if you're looking online for different kinds of paintbrushes, get a 3, 4, 5, 6 round, one of those or 2 of those, maybe a 3 and a 6, something like that, and then get a 2/0 liner or something like that. Okay, it's not the end of the world if you don't have the exact right thing. There's a lot of, what's this one? This is an 18/0, so this is super, super tiny. So there's lots of options. Okay, so then I tend to have a bigger brush. This is the one I often use. It's a filbert. That's the shape, this shape here. And it's a number 10. You can use that for putting down water over the entire painting to do backgrounds. And this will all make sense in the class, so don't worry. If you don't have something like this, don't panic. This is another kind. I like this. It's called a large area artist brush. It's 2 inches. That works. If you have a house painting brush, that works. If you have a kitchen sponge, that works. If you have a sponge brush, sometimes people have sponge brushes, that works. Basically, the idea is to get the water down on the background. I also have these, which are just for fun. Should you have any of these around, this would work as well. These, they're a little smaller, but these are pretty cool because they have water inside the barrel, which is pretty neat. So you push on this red part and the water just comes right out. I've got a bunch of sizes of those too, so those are really fun. All right, what is next? You're going to need water, of course. I always have two. I have 2 little ball jars. Actually, these are car jars, but 2 jars of water. I'd use, one is for rinsing out my brushes. The other is for clean water. So if I'm going to cover the entire paper with water to do a wet and wet background, I could always use my clean water to do that. That is helpful. If you are using craft paint or acrylic paint for your paint instead of watercolor, you're going to need something to stir it with. If you have a palette knife, that works. You can use craft sticks. That works. You could use the end of a paintbrush. That would work. You could use an old butter knife. You could use a spoon. You can use all kinds of things. So again, don't panic that you don't have this stuff at home. It's no big deal. There's lots of ways around it. Okay, then at the end of my paintings, I am going to pause this. Okay, at the end of my paintings, you'll notice, like on this goat, there's a lot of little black outlines. And that is these. That comes from these kinds of pens. So these are microns. They're by a company called Pigma Micron. And they're archival ink, which is nice. They come in a lot of different sizes. My go-tos are the 01s. And so it says on the end, on the cap end of the pen, it says 01. And then the 005. Those are my favorites. The 005 can make these really, really fine lines for the eyelashes. So I use these a lot at the ends of my watercolors. You could also, should you not have these or anything like them, you could use the fine Sharpie markers. Try it, like the edge of it, not flat down on the top, but the edge of it would probably work. You could also use a liner paintbrush and use black paint. That would work. So there's lots of options. You don't have to have these pens in particular. You might have something similar. Try it. Try it on a scrap piece of paper and see if you like it. Then I also sometimes use, I don't think I did, no, I did use one of these on the irises to get the highlight and a little tiny bit on the nose. So these are jelly rolls, and this came in a pack that has a 05, 08, and a 10. Those are okay. I've not ever used this, but it's a Sharpie paint marker. I don't know how tiny. It's pretty tiny, but it's about the size of a small Sharpie. So I've never used that one, but that would be something. You can also use white craft paint as your highlights. You could use white acrylic, like artist's acrylic paint, as your highlights, and you could use gouache. That works as well, and I often use that. So this is also gouache is opaque watercolor, as opposed to regular normal watercolor, what people think of as regular watercolor, is translucent. So if you're hearing a lot of squawking right now outside, I don't know, now I'm looking. My dogs are having a fit. If you're hearing a lot of squawking, those are my guineas. And they're carrying on. Oh, there's a hawk out there. Okay, pretty. All right. Sorry, had a moment of, not focused there. So those are some options. What else? I talked to you about that this is where I just keep water to be able to, I talked to you about that already. Okay, anything else? Salt. So I occasionally use salt in my watercolor paintings. I didn't do it on this, but it's always a fun effect. So in this one, if you can see how this works here, it used to look like this kind of smooth green part right here. And then when I added table salt to it, that's what it does. Isn't that kind of cool? So that's a fun effect. You could use it in all kinds of things, in a field of flowers or some grass, anything like that. You can use table salt, and that gets that finer texture. And you can use sea salt of any kind. I happen to have this Himalayan salt, and so that's that heavier stuff, and that gives you bigger blooms, is what they're called. So salt is another thing to maybe have around. I use sometimes these sea sponges. You get them wet first, otherwise the paint, you can see how that's kind of greenish. That didn't get wet first. So I have different types. Not necessary, but sometimes they're fun to use. This is an elephant ear sponge, and I just cut off a little piece of it. Sometimes I use the little edges of it for things. I have an entire slew of colored pencils. I was a colored pencil artist first, and so I have a lot of colored pencils that you can use. And if you have some, you might decide you want to use them. Let's see, anything else? I'm not sure anything else. Okay, I'm going to switch back to talking. So I think that's, so you can use, let's say you want to paint this entire thing in one fell swoop. I'm talking about this. And you don't want to wait for things to dry. You can absolutely, if you're home doing this, which I assume you will be, you can turn your oven on low. Mine's like 150, something like that. You can turn it on low and then just slide this paper, whether it's on a piece of cardboard. I'm looking at my cardboard over there. Piece of cardboard or not, whether it has the tape on it or not, either way. Just slide that in the oven for 5 or 10 minutes and it dries, and then you can continue on with your painting. You can also use a hair dryer. One thing about the hair dryer is it can make the paint move, and so if you're happy with the way it's faded out on the edges, you may or may not want to use a hair dryer. So that is, I believe, it. I'm going to put all of the descriptions for everything you might need in the links in the description below on the YouTube description. And I think that's it. If you have any questions at all, you can email me at julia@themotherranch. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So